welcome. We are back with another topic. So, this is going to be about the from the aviation space. Okay. Recently, in the last 1 month, a lot of incidents have happened in the aviation space. It happened with Indigo. So there's this flight between Istanbul to Delhi, I guess.
Yes.
So it was on 16th December. So this video went quite viral that the crew, which surprisingly doesn't much happen in the Indian aviation, and I guess even in the global aviation it's less, but a crew actually gave a peace of mind to the passengers, right? And because they also have a limit. So the good thing was they got support not just from people around, they also got support from the CEO of Indigo, right? So I was reading a statement, Indigo CEO Peter Elbers, who actually supported this incident. Obviously, this is something that we don't want to see often, but there is also a reason. I mean, and we'll discuss more about this because we, as passengers, have started in a way taking the crew members for granted. We think they're there to serve us, right, to any extent that we wish to, right, and there should be some boundaries that should be drawn. And I think that perhaps was bridged in that. So that happened. Then more incident with Indigo. It happened. Then Air India, an incident happened in the business class, right, where the airline actually did not do much, the crew did not do much, and the passenger was let go, right. Then there was this Thai airline, I think it's Kolkata to Bangkok,
Yes.
where passengers started fighting among themselves mid-air. Right, and obviously, as crew members, they don't have much in hand when passengers become so unruly. But yeah, those incidents have happened, and it happened like in a very short span of time. And this is something we want to discuss about today together. Like, how much should airlines tolerate consumers' demands, right? Inside the flight, right? Should boundaries be drawn, and if yes, what are those boundaries, right? What should say crew members keep in mind while dealing with passengers? What should passengers keep in mind? Maybe on those things would like to
Sure.
discuss further. So why don't you go ahead and first share your views on this, and then
Yes.
maybe I follow up.
Okay. So the some days ago, I took up the same topic on the same lines about airlines and about the flight crew. So I was teaching a course on service marketing, and the idea was to discuss about the physical evidences. And in the flight crew, it happens to be the uniform. And an article that I asked my students to read was about the new imposition of AI's Air India's rules on what uniform and what hygiene level should be maintained for men that who have less hair. They need to be bald, they need to shave every day. Women need to wear certain type of clothes. They need to the quality of their nails. All those things were covered in that newspaper article. So when I was discussing with my students, what I wanted to draw their attention to was the fact that while this is the physical evidence, what the air crew is wearing, what the flight crew is wearing inside, the bigger part of, or the more critical part of the flight attendants training and role on the aircraft is not about serving passengers, right? It is they are prepared for a situation in which, in case there is an emergency, they need to be effective, right? They need to be able to manage a situation on a flight, and a big part of their training goes into that. While we see only the glamorous and the what the spick and span um, uniforms and the behavior of the flight attendants, a big part of their um, training and a big part of their actual responsibility is what would happen in case of an emergency, right? So, and if someone is adept at that, I think all the other requirements, they are add-ons. Yes, one does expect someone to be what to be at least gracious, right? Man or woman, right? Gracious when they are, because it is ultimately a service experience, right? So the the quality of service would be determined by how the customer feels um, at the end of that experience, right? how does the customer feel special, or did the customer feel like just another person handed a cold beverage or a or whatever else? And the airline industry is very interesting because this is one situation in which there's this entire group of people, right, sitting in a constricted space, traveling over, um, I mean, traveling in the air without any option of leaving the flight midway if they wanted to, right, or getting off somewhere. And they're traveling in the air and inside that metal tube, inside a very controlled environment, and everybody is at the mercy of whatever's happening, right? The elements, the flight, the maintenance of the aircraft, but none of that is visible, right? A person goes into an aircraft thinking that, okay, I'm going to reach destination from A to B, but they do not have any guarantee or any knowledge or any way of checking whether the pilot is fit, whether the pilot is drunk or not, whether the aircraft has been maintained. They can maybe check for cleanliness, hygiene, that's all, right? But whether the engines have been maintained, whether the tires have been inflated, you don't see any of that, right? But what do you see? You see just the crew inside, and from the crew's behavior, you tend to extrapolate to other aspects also, right? So you might have some airline which invests a lot on having very prim and proper staff inside the airline, inside the plane, but then they do not invest on maintenance. But still, people will go off happy saying that I had a good flight because I was served very well. Right? So in that overall thing, I think while this is an important aspect, the service that you receive inside, that's the most tangible part, which is why all attention also tends to go onto this service, right? What is being felt by the consumer, right? Perception of the service is actually very different from the actual quality of the service. So my experience personally um, has been one where quite a few of the, I mean, I used to like traveling in the in Air India when I was a kid, Indian Airlines at that time. uh, I did not mind the um, middle-aged ladies, the matronly staff that they had on board the flights. Actually made me feel quite homely, right? It made me feel comfortable. The food was used to be good, and as a kid I used to really appreciate the fact that they were generous with candies. I grew up at a time when full service or all the frills of the airlines started going off, and we had these budget airlines coming in. And I never got to travel by Deccan, but I have traveled by the other budget airlines. And what I feel is that, well, if your requirement is of uh, just traveling from A to B and you're not a fussy person, a budget airline is also good enough, right? Uh, Kingfisher did spoil me during my MBA days because Kingfisher was rising at that point of time, Kingfisher Airlines, and we had this route from Delhi to Kozhikode, which was via Coimbatore, but they used to treat it as one sector, and they had coupons which I had bought at a discount, and I ended up traveling a lot on Kingfisher even as a student. And their service was something which was really something to look forward to, right? And I never heard of any experience or any untoward incident of misbehavior by Kingfisher crew. In fact, maybe because of the glamorous type of crew that they had and stuff, I've heard of cases where customers ended up misbehaving with the flight crew. And I mean, which was sad because maybe somewhere the seeds of that of viewing the flight attendants as objects um, could have started more by due to the Kingfisher uh, emphasis on glamour associated um, with flight attendants. Indigo carried it on. I don't know why. or what is the story behind Indigo getting that 6E tag, right? For their flights, right? Like I think SpiceJet has SG or something like that. Uh, 6E, obviously, when you say it, there is a, I mean, it comes out as sexy, right? So there was that naughtiness in that play. So somewhere maybe they were setting themselves up to maybe challenge Kingfisher's um, mantle of glamour. But somewhere down the line, they realized that it was not going to be about that. It had to be about budget, about efficiency, about service. And I think they've sort of managed that well. They've been the butt of quite a few such incidents. But what one needs to also know is that they have one of the largest networks, right, in India. They are operating some of the largest networks. And being a private player and operating so many flights every day, there are bound to be issues that come up. And it's part of um, the operations of day-to-day operations. There is one anecdote or one incident also that I had in one of my recent flights. I'd like to share that also, but after I've been speaking for too long, so I think maybe after you say
No,
something.
that's absolutely okay. So, yeah, so what I think is somewhere, so be it Kingfisher or be it many other airlines, Deccan and before whatever, I mean, all those started. If you look at this aviation space, and I just want to take a macro view before I zoom in into the particular incidents. If you look at the aviation space, it's a very highly competitive market. It's a bloodbath, right? I mean, it's a very operationally efficient, it's a very operationally intensive market. Profit margins are very low. Most of these airlines do not even make money, right? So, I mean, Indigo is one of the rare ones which actually make money, and it's true global, worldwide. It's not just about India, right? Even though we see active users of light, at least in India, to be on a very high or higher side, the numbers are quite high. But if you still look at the profit margins, it's pretty not a very attractive market to get into. Now, when the competition is so high, right, where in a way differentiation, your scope of differentiation is also not that great. I mean, you have the same kind of flights, right, which you source from the top makers. There are hardly few hand counted ones. You get them, you paint it with your color of the company, and then you just get to fly, right? I mean, that's it. You have a flight, you have a pilot, and you have the cabin crew, and you just sell the same kind of seats everywhere. So how do you differentiate? How do you differentiate yours from them? Some beverages might help, but then that would not be a sustainable model given how the kind of market India is, right? Sometimes it feels good to have good food on the flight for free, but then for frequent flyers, it's not always the game, right? That they would be attracted to. So what else is left? It's about what is left is the feel good factor inside your how the experience that you felt inside the flight during your journey, be it a 45-minute journey or a 4-hour journey, the experience that you felt inside the flight. That's what at the end of the day is differentiating, right? So for example, everyone is now trying for low cost airlines. I mean, trying to keep the prices as low as possible, and that's where the margins are being cut. But now you have two flights, for example, just an arbitrary number, for example, for a route, someone is charging 4,500. There's another flight which is charging 4,800, right? Now, for a consumer, like the default choice perhaps in a price sensitive market would be 4,500, provided is the lowest price that is being offered. But then if suppose the consumer, maybe from past experience, realizes that the airline with 4,800, I had a better experience there, right? So in a I mean, given it's not a rational society, human beings are not rational as we now understand from behavioral economics, and not unlike what classical economics tell us. There will be people who will choose the 4,800 flight because of the experience they might have had previously, right? Now, for the airline, they also understand this, and for the airline now it's pressure is even double down, that now they have to live up to the expectations, the service expectation, the expectations of the experience of which a consumer is coming inside the flight, right? Because that gives them a leeway, that gives them the leverage rather to charge slightly higher than the market rate, right? Because that's their little scope of differentiation, that experience that they provide, right? Now, with
True.
this very small leverage that they have, I mean, it's pretty minimal, right? It's something that even across flights it may not be true. It may vary from crew to crew as well. Do airlines try to have a standard protocol? We're talking of framework, they try to have that framework where they can give an unified experience, but then uh, it is really difficult. It's really difficult because something which is intangible, which is very subjective, the experience that is being provided is very subjective, right? If for example you might be more cordial, just your personal skills are very good, very cordial, so automatically when you talk to someone, the person will feel better with you. For me it may not come out so naturally, so automatically the first impression would be better for you rather than me, right? Now if both of us are working for an airline, how do you how do they ensure that both of us provide the same kind of experience? So that bit of subjectivity is always going to be there. So now, given this differentiation that we have about service, about experience, now airlines will have to fight through this, right? How do they do it? Who is their frontline workers? Is the crew members. Passengers don't see the pilot; they just interact with the crew members. So now the crew members have extensive pressure on them to pester using the word pester here, to pester the customers to the extent where sometimes it may look even crossing the lines, crossing the boundaries, right? And that's what has been happening all through in the Indian aviation space, right? And we've seen so many airlines going broke, no more existing, right? Because they just could not play this blood game, right? So now the existing one that is there, they also understand it's a very high pressure game that they're playing in the aviation space. Now, with this crew members and the entire experience put on this on the responsibility on the shoulders of this crew members, they are expected to do anything. Now, as consumers, we start thinking that okay, if I'm in a flight, I can ask anything, right? Unlike railways, unlike buses, I can ask anything, and this people, these crew members, are obliged to listen to me, right? I can be anything. If I ask for hot water, that means they have to give hot water. If they don't give, I'm going to say foul or cry foul about it, and I'll say the experience is not good, right? So they have to give hot water, right? So if I ask for a certain food item, that means they need to have it. If they don't have it, they have to be very polite in apologizing to me, right? They have to like literally they have to make me feel like king. Okay, I understand it's not there, but that feel good factor has to be there, right? Now this in a way I guess has spoiled the consumers, has spoiled us, right? Now we have very unrealistic expectations. I mean, if you go to a train, we never expect that. Right? If you look at even the hawker, those who come pass by, sometimes they also speak rudely, and but we don't say the experience in the train was not good. We just have contextualize it, saying that this person was not good or this route is not that great. We don't contextualize the entire experience of the train, right? But in flight we do that, and in flight
True.
we do that because that's where the unrealistic expectations have taken us,
True.
right? And now the moment we feel that someone is an airline crew is not really bowing down to us, is not really showing the servility that she or he should show, we start getting aggressive, right? Consumers start getting aggressive, and most of the times when they start getting aggressive, I think this is the kind of incidences that we'll witness. Okay, so
True.
the question is, how do we now deal with such situations? I think
True.
it's important that airlines, and I think all the airlines, because there are a handful of airlines right now operating in India, right? They should now come together and should actually develop some SOPs, right, as to how much they should they should pester or they should allow the consumers demand, how much they should listen to consumers demand, and those SOPs should also be communicated to the passengers, to the travelers. Just like before every flight, the safety instructions are given. I think service instructions also should be given. There should be another manual for service instructions, or maybe experience instructions. Experience instruction may not be the right word, but service instruction. That is, this is something that we'll be giving you, right? Beyond this, if you ask straight away, we are sorry, it's not going to happen. That's it. Right? Those service instructions have to be clear, just like safety instructions. I think this will put a lot of expectation. I mean, if I draw a Venn diagram of the kind of expectations that customers tend to have, and the service that an airline tend to provide or can provide, will find very little mismatch right now, very little overlapping right now. These two Venn diagrams need to overlap more. I think one of the ways
True.
that can be done is service instruction that can be there, right? So that's what I now your take on this, and
Okay.
maybe I'll follow
So
up with this.
I found I mean I was thinking of something very interesting while you were saying that, which is why do people still use the railways in spite of bad experiences? One, it's lower cost, but some routes are I mean the AC two-tier ticket. The AC first class is anyway more expensive than an air flight, but AC two tier might also match an airfare, right? But what do we get on train routes? We get maybe cost at some point, but we also get connectivity, which remote connectivity, right? Places which you might not be able to access through a plane. Um, you can access through the railway network that is there. So therefore, people get connectivity also. What I think that consumers or sorry, airlines need to do is to make it clear about what all are they offering, right? What is the value proposition for the consumer? Is the value proposition is the flight and the core value proposition, which is the travel, have they uh, sort of neglected that and made that secondary and made the in-flight experience primary, right? Is the in-flight experience the big part about the value proposition, or can these airlines do something more, right? uh, for example, I think Indigo, right, does one very good thing, which is that it talks about its on-time um, arrival and on-time service, right? What it is able to do with that is say that we stand for on-time service, right? So for getting you from point A to point B, you've got a business meeting, you can plan to the dot, right? If you're going on an Indigo flight, most of the times we will make you get there on time, because now that becomes my priority as a business traveler. I am not too concerned about whether I get a hot meal, right, or a lavish meal on my flight. For me, it is important. I need to get to a point at a certain time. I don't mind that I don't get a laid out full meal, right? I don't mind the what the cup noodles or whatever, pour hot water ready, 5 minutes ready type of snack that they're offering. Um, that becomes then the value proposition, right? So maybe airlines, other than, I mean, your suggestion of the SOPs and what they need to do to create a standardized environment is important, but at the same time, identifying their core propositions, what can they stand for, and bringing that up, I think that is an important relook that a lot of airlines need to do, and be rational, right? You might not have the ability to, or the ground operations to ensure 100% on time what on time arrival. Therefore, then work on other aspects. Tell people, I mean, offer them other things, right? If you can't guarantee on time arrival, then give them better flight experience or give them better airport experience. Maybe you invest in making sure that people's airport experience is better, right? Maybe your arrival area, your boarding gate area, you do something extra in your boarding gate area if you can't invest in other things, right? So what I'm trying to say is that make understand the consumer expectations and therefore work on what you can deliver, and therefore create expectations in that, right? So if SpiceJet is not able to deliver, I mean, just taking a name, is not able to ensure that people reach on time, can they do something else which creates a better customer experience? And therefore customer expectation becomes that, okay, good service then should mean this also, right? It need not only be on time. I'm a leisure traveler, I don't mind reaching an hour late, right? So but I want this sort of special experience that the other airline can give me. That is one. I'll tell you about my personal experience of having missed a flight a month ago. This was when that entire issue at the Delhi airport was starting, the first day of that. I missed my flight, and in the morning, it was an early morning flight. I missed it by 2 minutes. 2 minutes because Indigo closes its doors or its boarding gate 25 minutes prior to departure. I was at the boarding gate at 23 minutes prior to departure. So the plane is still there. There are still 23 minutes left for the plane to start taxiing, right? But I was denied entry onto the flight. Now, when I think of it, I would feel that, I mean, why would the airline do that, right? Why would they do that? Why would they not allow me to enter? And I should have created an issue about it because I've seen people entering late also. But the ground staff, they tried, they called onto the aircraft, and they were told by the ground staff at the aircraft that the manifest has already been signed. Once they said that, I did not insist further because I know that that document is fairly sacrosanct for them. Once that is signed, uh, making any changes on that becomes a security issue also. So I did not insist further, and I missed that flight. But what I realized is that for Indigo's operations, that closing the boarding gate 25 minutes prior to departure, while it might create a bad air with consumers, is very important for its value proposition, which is reaching on time, right? Because it works on that 25-minute leeway to get everything ready, all the passengers settled down, and all the in-flight work half started, so that as soon as they're in the air and at cruising altitude, they're able to start the in cabin service, and they are able to, and they actually able to start taxiing as soon as the time for their takeoff comes up. And maybe it is because of that awareness that I was um, not I did not create an issue about having missed that flight and things. Sorry, but I think understanding your value proposition and therefore creating or planning back end for that, while that might lead to some sort of pushback, and while that customers might react to that, the suggestion that you'd made about educating the customers, right, that this is what is going to be our um, this is what is going to be our SOP, right? Educating the customers about that, which is what Indigo does. It specifically says gate on each message, gates will be closed 25 minutes prior to departure. They are educating, and I think that is the way to go. Over to you.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So because I think this is part of the experience, and this is what I actually meant by the service manual as well, right? Where the expectations have to be very clear. This 25 minutes means 25 minutes. It cannot be even 24 or 23. Yes, this will create problem for some passengers, maybe like sometimes unfortunately this time it was you on the other side, but then for their overall experience that they give, right? That's why it's important. It also gives uh, the staff on the ground that clarity that 25 minutes is 25 minutes, right? And this is something that we tend to do in our classes as well, right? When you say student that you cannot enter 5 minutes beyond that, means 5 minutes is 5 minutes, because it is important for the overall experience of the entire class. It's true for them as well, right? So similarly, as they're doing with the timing, right, because this is an important value proposition for them, they can also do that about the experience that they provide inside the flight, right? If this is there, it's there, right? If it's not there, it's not there, right? If you ask this, we'll give. If you don't, we'll not, right? When, for example, if you want to get up from your seat, once the flight takes off, till this point, I mean, whatever the time is, you cannot get out. We expect you not to get out. I mean, those instructions have to be very clear, right? Right now, they're not doing it. So these service instructions, they do that for safety, but they don't do it for service, right? And as a result, some passengers tend to argue with the crew that why are you not allowing? It's urgent for me. It's this for me, that for me. So allow me, right? And every time the crew member have to explain, no, 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 we cannot because this is the rule. This is the rule. So these rules, if they communicate right at the beginning, right, or if it comes with the tickets, I'm sure not many would read. But then the point is, if this comes start coming in, gradually people will start noticing. It will not. This change will not happen in a day, But if they make, because now safety instructions, I'm pretty sure not many of us actually pay attention to it. But since we have heard so many times because of our flights, now in a way we know what it is all about, right? In a way we know what the safety instructions are expected out of us, right? So we may never know. I mean, we may not know how the emergency door opens, right? But we know that this instruction is going to give, and there's a way to open it, right? But since we did not do practically yet, so we may not know. But then the same thing applies for service expectations as well, for service manuals as well. That will keep expectations in check. And a lot of these incidents, I mean, these incidents have blown out of proportion, so we know about it. But in every flight, or almost in every one out of three or four flights, some little altercations do happen. We all have witnessed that, right? Some little bit of altercation happen. They do not make news because they do not get blown out of proportion, but those altercations can be avoided, I guess. And that will make the life of the crew members a lot easier. That will make the life of the passengers a lot easier. Because understand, in a flight of say 50 people sitting, not everyone is in aggressive enough, right? There may be three or four people, but because of their rude behavior, the experience of the entire flight goes for a toss, right? And no one likes it, not neither the
True.
airline nor the passengers. So those expectations need to be met. So before we end this, I want to ask you this one question. Uh, what do you think should be there in those service instructions or service manual? You think there? What do you think should would work? Maybe one or couple of suggestions from your end that you think that airlines should decide. Just like the timing thing that you said, if it's 25 minutes, it's 25 minutes. Something that should be there which is non-negotiable and which should also be communicated to the passengers. And I'm asking this from a perspective that which, in order to reduce such kind of incidents, right? What should be the SOP for the crew members? For example, if you have to train the crew members, what are the few things you would say to avoid
So,
such kind of incident? Maybe an end after that.
I'll start with an anecdote, a personal experience I had very recently, which could have been could have blown out of proportion, but it was handled fairly well. Was the passenger sitting next to me? There was a gentleman. This guy wanted to catch the flight attendant's attention, right? And she was serving the seat behind us. She'd already served our seat and she'd moved on. And this guy, he was trying to catch her attention, but because she was speaking to another passenger, he was not able to. So what he did is he sort of flicked his wrist, his fingers, right, and tried calling that person. Now, the lady, she came up to him, came to the front side after she dealt with that previous passenger, came to him and said, "Sir, please ऐसे करके मत बुलाइए," right? Which is, and I found that to be good in the sense that I appreciated the fact that the flight attendant has been given that power to say that to a customer because it is actually considered, at least in India, is considered to be a rude way, right? It is the sort of way that you'd call a subordinate or call, I mean, subordinate is also a sort of wrong
I
word
guess
to
you
use,
should
but
not
then,
call
yeah,
anyone that way. I mean,
exactly.
just
Right?
I mean, there's a way. And in flight, there's a better way. I mean, you can click on that light
Yes,
and people
the
can. I
button
think this
and
is
yeah,
something
true,
that can be communicated. So one thing, I
true,
mean, many passengers actually don't know how to call, right? And
exactly,
this actually can be told. This is one
true,
thing that this is the way to call, right?
true.
Which when they just don't know, you have
And
to
it could
click.
be part of the safety instructions, right?
Yeah,
These
okay.
are certain very basic things. You're teaching people how to
Yes.
put on their seat belts. Yes, oxygen tanks also. Nobody says that the oxygen in these tanks are only for 10 minutes. Obviously, they don't want people to get scared, right? And
Hmm.
it's not tank also, right? It's
Hmm.
chemically created oxygen. Sorry. So yeah, I think empowerment and maybe, as you've mentioned, it should be part of maybe the instructions, or it should be part of maybe the airports can do something like that. They are commercially using a lot of space for advertising and stuff. Maybe close to the boarding gate, they have some placard or something which actually gives these instructions that behave well with the flight crew. Uh, they're a big part of their duty is keeping you safe in case of an emergency. Serving you is just part of the thing. I mean, it's gonna
Hmm.
actually, that's gonna have other repercussions, right? You don't want
Yeah, but it can be
to
done in
prime
a better way.
people
So
about safety,
there can be some
right?
do's and don'ts,
True.
right? This is
Yes.
so this can be done, but I guess
True.
I get the sense. I mean, that is important. Those expand. At least in the flight, it can be done. If not at the
True.
airport where they don't want to kill up
Yes.
the commercial space, because airports are run by different authority and airlines are run by different, right?
True.
So at least
True.
within the flight, you can
You
tell us
can.
some do's and don'ts. And the fact is, see, lot many first time flyers are actually getting into this. And by
I was just coming to that.
right, so
Yes.
actually they don't know yet how to the etiquette that's being expected inside an airline, right? In a bus, in a train, these are different etiquettes, but within an airline, these are different etiquettes. So I think those etiquettes need to be actually communicated, and it will do a lot of good to us if those etiquettes are told or communicated within flights. This will also have a very trickle down effect in the other modes of transport where you go, right? In the restaurants, in other places when we call someone, actually in restaurants also people tend to flip fingers to call, right? Which is not a great way to do it. But once something happens within the flight in that environment which is told, a lot of people at least some of them will take it forward as well,
True.
right? So
True.
this thing should come in. Sorry, I just interrupted, but go ahead.
Yes, no, I totally agree with that. In fact, maybe my suggestion of at the airport was not thought through. In flight, definitely it is possible. Maybe uh, I don't know if you came across that SpiceJet pilot's announcement where he was doing a poetic announcement, right?
Yeah, yes, yes, yes.
Maybe some things like those could be done because right now even the safety instruction thing has become such a, monotonous thing. As you said,
Yeah,
we don't pay attention to them because now we know, right? So maybe those things are not what are required, right? Because if there is an emergency situation, then we can pull the oxygen mask like second nature. But then, as you mentioned, we would not be able to open the emergency doors because that we never paid attention to the fact that emergency doors are there and that they need to be opened. I mean, when you do sit next to an emergency door, you're given special instructions. Those are there, yes, but I mean, maybe everybody should have some idea that this is how it needs to be opened, right? And also being told that don't worry, the emergency door cannot be opened without uh, I mean, by a madman sitting in the flight, right? You don't need to worry about that either because in situations like air travel where people, even though it is much safer than road travel, people still associate fear and risk with air travel. I think dissuading that, I mean, or taking that stress away is going to be one underlying thought that the airlines would have in all sorts of communication. When you asked about what all should they include, uh, I'll tell you. Let me just share a very short case that I'm aware of. One of the first arrests under the NIA Act, right, which is the Terrorist Act, was of someone who a fairly successful Gujarati businessman who is alleged to have written a note that there is a bomb on this flight and left it in a tissue box in an airline, right? Now, this businessman has been in prison, and there's a trial going on multiple levels that I mean, district and state, I think level, it has already, he's already been held guilty. But there is no one-to-one evidence which uh, links the that passenger with this note, right? But he's been in prison for the past at least 6 7 years, right? And there is no bail and no way that he's ever going to come out if it reaches the Supreme Court, and the Court also does not grant any sort of um, relief. Now, what I want to say in all this is that most consumers are not aware that their actions on a plane, right? If it is reported to be a bad action by a flight attendant, right, can actually have major repercussions, right? The business class urinating incident was something where the person got let off very easily, right? I think he must have been a very influential person because of which he got let off that easily, right? A 30-day ban is nothing, right? A 30-day ban is nothing for the act that he had done. If he had done it outside an airline, right, in public somewhere, could have been a much bigger case that could have been created, right? But here it's just a 30-day suspension. But the airline could have created a much bigger issue, right? Um, Airlines, because of the hijack threat and all these factors, crew actually end up getting a lot of power, right? To classify a behavior as unruly, to classify a passenger as a potential danger, right? And all these factors, I don't think consumers are so aware. Consumers tend to still go in with that consumer mentality, not knowing that one action, right? Some person's coincidental visit to a toilet and coming back and a note being found there has resulted in that person being in jail for more than 6 years now. Consumers don't realize that, right? The guys who fought on that flight from Bangkok to Kolkata, they did not realize that uh, the flight crew uh, had the authority to actually call their behavior dangerous to the flight and the other flight members, and therefore they could have been tried similar to any hijacker, right? So I think
Mhm.
making people aware that you are, while you're special, you are under a lot of regulations, right? So please ensure that you adhere to those regulations, because there are huge repercussions otherwise. I mean, but then what needs to be done is it has to be communicated very softly.
No, there's a pretty good anecdotes. I did not know about this case of the businessman making suicide with a note. This is pretty good anecdotes. Yes. So I guess, yeah. So we had a good discussion on this. Hopefully the audience will get some value out of it. So thank you so much, George, for your time,
Thank
and we'll
you.
be back again with another interesting topic to discuss.
Yes,
Right. And by the way, before we
sure.
end, this is just a disclaimer that these are just our perspectives, right? This is our take on this incident,
Yes.
and we are not representing anyone, just our
Yeah.
take on this. Yeah.
And we could be biased, we could be misogynist, we could be whatever negative term that you want to use, but then that's us, and these are personal views, so forgive us if we do not match your your
Absolutely.
scale.
Absolutely.
Okay.